talk about tariffs. Trump has got significant tariffs proposed on Mexico, Canada, China. Will they work or will they be a disaster?
And now, The Edwin Black Show. Sponsored by the Books of Edwin Black, available on Amazon and at booksellers worldwide. And now, here's Edwin.
Welcome to the Edwin Black Show, coming to you twice monthly from Washington, D.C. Hello, I'm Edwin Black, investigative journalist, historian, and author of 225 editions in 40 languages in 190 countries worldwide, including IBM and the Holocaust, War Against the Weak, and the Farhud, as well as other books. This is a show for opinion makers and decision makers, not mass clicks. So if you think our show's content is meaningful, spread the word throughout your most informed networks. Subscribe for free alerts at theedwinblackshow.com. And if you want to support our work, please visit theedwinblackshow.com/support. Your help, big or small, assures our complete and utter intellectual and uncensored journalistic independence. Year-end giving is now, right now. So go to theedwinblackshow.com/support and keep us independent. Please assist. Now, today's episode is made possible and sponsored without any preconditions, requests, or stipulations by the historic re-release of the abridged IBM and the Holocaust audiobook, narrated by me and just re-released at Amazon, Audible, iTunes, and wherever audiobooks are found. If you would like to honor someone with a sponsorship, contact us. That said, remember, I only speak for myself and for history. Today, we welcome viewers from across America, including our watch parties in the villages, Newton, Mass., Chicago, Tampa Bay, Harvey. I know you're out there overseas. I see viewers logged on from most of our usuals. Australia, I see New Zealand, Germany, Austria, Holland, Sweden, France, Italy, Luxembourg, Hungary, Poland, Japan, Great Britain, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, I think I see, Argentina, and Israel, plus other countries. If you have a question, place one short sentence in Zoom's QA feature. Now, the Edwin Black Show, along with our YouTube site, is global and fast-growing, enjoying many scores of thousands of views. We speak frankly and without tremor to a fragmented world, seeking better understanding of our tormented past, our present, very, very tense, and a future still uncertain, completely uncertain. By the way, stay tuned for my special word of wisdom at the very end of the show, just before I sign off. This is our last show of the year, capping a half decade of the Edwin Black Show. The end show this year, it will launch us into momentous second Trump administration. So we are taking your most provocative and compelling questions. We couldn't take them all, but I did gather up as many as I could. But my answers will leave nothing to the imagination. So let's start. Watch Party in the Villages. This was pre-submitted. Why did Ireland intervene in the South African case of genocide against Israel? The answer is this. It's a bogus charge in a bogus contract dispute court that has no jurisdiction. And even under those circumstances, they found, this is the International Court of Justice, not the International Criminal Court, they found that Israel had only engaged in self-defense, had been careful to supply humanitarian warnings and routes and water and thousands of trucks of food. And so there was no chance to find them guilty of extermination. So Ireland entered so they could modify the term genocide to cover what Israel did, which was self-defense. And that can't be done because the word genocide is not a jargon word. The word genocide is a legal definition which is written into international law, whatever that is, into the Genocide Treaty, and it can't be changed just because someone wants it to be changed. It's really no different than if you had a capital murder statute in the New York Code or the U.S. Federal Code. It can't be changed just because you want it. So thank you for that question. Newton, Mass. Is America's Civil War that you have spoken of now closer or further away? Well, it's much, much closer because before we just had fractious differences of opinion. People were at each other's throats. They agreed. Half the country agreed on almost nothing with the other half. Half the country tried to cancel the other half. That was just a lot of super bad attitudes. But now we're going to come up against jurisdiction against jurisdiction. And the federal jurisdiction, no matter what Chicago or California or San Diego tries to legislate, trumps the local jurisdiction, especially on the issue of deportation. And so we're going to see the potentiality, and this has been openly warned, of mayors and even police chiefs and city councils arrested. And if it's a conspiracy between maybe several legislators and the mayor or the county exec, then runs it up to a felony. It can also qualify under obstruction of justice. Our current Justice Department has shown that it's very willing to file obstruction of justice charges. And so this is where the rubber meets the road. Either there's going to be a meeting like with Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, and Homan, the border czar, and they're going to sit down and work out the operation, or you're going to have mayors and governors, like the governor of Illinois, being warned and possibly arrested. And then when the feds come in to arrest the governor or the mayor, his local security detail are going to have to make a decision. Do we obstruct the feds? And if they obstruct the feds trying to arrest the mayor, then you're going to have those guys taken into custody. We have some very, very volatile times ahead. Thank you for that question. Watch Party in Chicago. You wrote about illegal Palestinian settlements in Area C. Where are they now? Yes, I did. There was a 3-part or 4-part series, and I think I've checked on the progress. When the Y River arrangement was done on Area C, that was an international negotiation with the Palestinians and Israelis in the so-called Y River location in the United States. There were only 268 structures on the ground. The Palestinian Authority was under a no construction order at that time. Today, there are 3,400 illegal structures in the Y designated nature reserve. So these are guys who are building structures, no permits, no codes. They're being aided by the EU. They're being aided by international NGOs. And when Israel tries to enforce the law, as any state or county or city in the United States would do for an unlicensed structure, then they say, oh, that's my home, that's my mosque, that's my library, that's my clinic. And that's why they always build a school first, and then the next illegal structure is a mosque, and then the next one is a clinic, because it's always for the cameras. Thank you for that question. Suzanne in Teaneck, can you tell me what is happening in Syria? Who invaded what? Syria is a mess. Modern Syria only became an independent nation 3 years before Israel in 1945, when the UN took effect. It was contemplated and, shall we say, kick-started by the French mandate from the League of Nations in 1920 1922 after World War I, or some say 1920, depends upon what part of the League of Nations you're looking at. But who occupied it for 450 years, 4.5 centuries before World War I? And the answer is the Ottoman Empire, which means Turkey. Now, Turkey and Erdogan especially have supported a terrorist coalition to eject and overthrow the Assad regime and throw the Russians out, and at the same time have a ejection of the Shiite influence of Syrian Hezbollah, the Iranians, and all of that. And this coalition is led by Abu Muhammad al-Julani. That's Julani. Now, some people are confused because they've seen the name Golani, not Julani. And that's because in the Arabic syntax, the G becomes a J. So forget about Golani, it's just Julani, al-Julani. That said, the guy in charge is now reverting to his real name, which is Ahmed al-Sharaa. Now, this guy is leading a group called the HTS, that's Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which arose in 2017 out of al-Nusra. And al-Nusra was the al-Qaeda subsidiary in Syria. And HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, stands for, the English is, Organization for the Liberation of Syria, or it could be interpreted Organization for the Liberation of the Levant, which would be the entire Fertile Crescent. Now, this HTS group, they rely upon factional memberships from, I think, about 20 different terrorist organizations. Some of them are ragtag, some of them are organized, some of them are under the influence of the United States through the Jordanian bases. Others are under the control of Turkey. Some are under the control of Iran. And I'm just going to give you a few. Jaish al-Hara, Sham, Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, Ansar al-Din Front, Jaish Sunna, Lilal al-Haq, Nur al-Din al-Zenki movement. There's just a ton of these and too many to go forward with. Now, the intent of Erdogan is to annex part of Syria. Erdogan is practicing Lebensraum. That means that Erdogan doesn't want Turkey to be confined to its current boundaries in Turkey. You may remember, after World War I, Turkey lost the war. The Ottoman Empire was dismantled. And the Ottoman Empire really did not end World War I. A lot of people think it was the Versailles Treaty. It was not till July of 1923 in Lausanne, the Treaty of Lausanne, that the Ottoman Empire finally agreed to its new borders. It lost its colonies in Asia, in Europe, in Africa, North Africa. It was now confined to this little space. But what does Erdogan say? I'm going to read it to you. It says, Turkey is greater than Turkey itself. As a nation, we cannot limit our horizon to 782,000 square kilometers. So he wants Turkey to reclaim its status of like the Ottoman Empire. And they actually have 2 provinces in Syria that they are carving out for themselves. So at a minimum, Turkey is going to take part of Syria. At a minimum, you're looking at other groups in surrounding Syria taking other bits of Syria. And you're looking at the Kurds and the Druze who may actually declare independence and or align themselves with Israel in a kind of a union, of an interprovincial union. And so I think that there's a strong possibility, write this down, that means you, Harv, there will be no Syria in a year. No Syria as we know it. No Syria as was created by the oil guys at the League of Nations in the early 1920s. It may be decapitated, it may be under vivisection, it may be claimed, and we just don't know what we're going to see. But in the meantime, there's 18 to 20 terrorist groups running around. This is a real problem. Which leads me to the next question I have here from Joseph in Denver. Leaders of 6 Druze villages in southern Syria have publicly declared their desire to join Israeli territory, aligning themselves with Israel's Golan Heights. They stated, quote, "We want to be under Israeli rule and ask Israel not to leave the villages in southern Syria." So what this means is that the Druze have gone public on the other side of the Golan Heights to say they want to join Israel. Israel would love to have them, but they can't have them. Israel loves its Druze community. Its Druze community mainly loves Israel, and some of Israel's fiercest and most loyal fighters are from the Druze community, and of course, they are the only non-Jewish constituency which is drafted into the military. So it's just another complexity. So this is why I say we may have a Turkish sphere of influence, we may have a Druze nation, if you will, or an Israeli sphere of influence with the Druze. We may have a Kurdistan arising out of Syria, and there won't be anything left of the Syria that we knew and that Assad plundered. And by the way, remember please that 100,000 graves were just uncovered in Syria. That is a mass grave of 100,000 individuals. Not 1,000, but 100,000. It's unprecedented. And no one is saying a word about this to the ICC, to the International Court of Justice, to the United Nations, to CNN, to all these peace groups. And where is Assad? He and his family were skirted away into Russia, and he took with him, he stole with him, $8 billion of Syrian money. And he's in Russia right now. Just want to mention what is not being discussed. 100,000 people dead in a mass grave. All right, Marina in Edinburgh. I put all these Syria questions together. Did the Israeli Air Force take out Syria's munitions before these terrorists got them? And the answer is yes. In just 48 hours, the IAF struck over 500 targets in Syria. That's unprecedented. And these strikes destroyed more than 85% of Syria's air defense systems and 40% of its fighter jets. In addition, it looks like about 100% of his drone inventory was destroyed, and about 390 artillery positions were eliminated. And to be more specific, 100% of the SA-2, SA-3 ground-to-air batteries, 86%, this is from the IDF intelligence, 86% of the SA-22 and SA-6 advanced systems, 80% of the SA-17 batteries, the full batteries, and 66% of the SA-26 systems. So Israel did such an extraordinary job that these terrorists will not have more than rifles and a few captured tanks to use and will not be able to threaten their neighbors. Sally in Miami. Sabotage of Trump and the American Democratic decision. Is it happening? Yes, the losing, bruising Democrats, the deep fringe and the deep state within the Democrats are now sabotaging the Trump administration, which is due to come in now let's get specific. Senator Markey has asked for the Biden administration to create special executive orders limiting the incoming president's right to use nuclear weapons. Can you believe that? Actually trying to rewrite the chain of command. A bunch of Democratic activists in the restaurant industry in Washington have vowed to disrupt the dinners of any Trump administration personnel, and they've done it quite publicly. I want to give you an example. There was one woman, according to media, Susanna Van Roy. She was a server at Bouchard's Saloon, which is on Capitol Hill, and she publicly stated, I personally, quote, I personally would refuse to serve any person in office who I know of as being a, quote, sex trafficker or trying to deport millions of people. And this woman has identified herself on social media as a organizer for Beto O'Rourke's failed run for the Texas governor's job. But guess what happened, folks? This restaurant, Bouchard's Saloon, said that these remarks by her, and they were public, and they weren't only ones, were reprehensible, and she was fired for violating the zero tolerance policy on discrimination. Now, let me say that food preparation and handling is a very, very delicate and important matter. People have allergies, they have schedules, they have dietary needs, and they're paying for a good meal. And when any of that is sabotaged deliberately, it constitutes, in my opinion, a flagrant, not fragrant, but it's also fragrant if you think about it, a flagrant violation of law. And these people should be singled out, their own words used against them, and they should be sued and or prosecuted for violating individual civil rights or discrimination statutes. So let's fight against this. I think the current administration will have no compunction in doing that. But the most egregious part of this is the sudden rush effort by the Biden administration to sell off large portions of the border wall before the Defense Department coming and the Pentagon and ICE and Customs and Border Control can use them to finish the wall. Now everybody knows that 90% of the counties voted for Trump and voted for this policy, and they want the border wall finished. And yet it's now going to be auctioned off for 5 cents on a dollar. Texas has offered to buy all of these goods and store them and give them to the federal government. But I say more is needed. I say arrest these legislators, the truckers, auctioneers, and anyone who is planning to dispose of the wall, and charge them federally with federal sabotage. Now I'm going to quote the exact paragraph. If you go to chapter 105, subparagraph 2151 of Title 18, you see that it specifies that anyone who impedes or interferes with or subverts or does anything to stop the use of any item associated with national defense, and they actually include here poles, wires, fixtures, buildings. In one place in section 2142, it includes fortifications, such as a border wall. And in 2153, it says the intent would only be to interfere or injure. Any of those people are guilty of sabotage. And if 2 of them or 3 of them, it says that right in there, are engaged in this, it's a conspiracy. And that's exactly what it is, because this stuff is supposed to be used by the Defense Department, by the incoming administration, for our defense, for our border, to fight against the fentanyl and the other uses which have already been made clear. And so subverting this means sabotage. Prosecute. Get the names, prosecute. And this is why so many congressmen have warned the Lloyd Austin from the Defense Department chief to keep all papers, electronic and hard, so that they can look at exactly what was done and what was the intent when it was being done. Thank you very much. Christine in Indiana. Hi, Christine. She wants me to talk about tariffs. Trump has got significant tariffs proposed on Mexico, Canada, China. Will they work or will they be a disaster? The tariffs are fabulous. Just threatening these tariffs got Canada to immediately super ramp up its border patrols in terms of surveillance, in terms of obstructions, in terms of interdiction, in terms of interception. Some ministers have actually resigned because they're so nonplussed by it. And we're told that Justin Trudeau, he calls himself a great feminist, that Justin Trudeau is on the verge of resigning, and he cites these tariffs. Now, you should know that all these countries have tariffs on us. For instance, Mexico, in April 2024, invoked a 5 to 50% tariff known as Regla Octava, that's Rule 8. It's 5 to 50% on steel, on aluminum, textiles, clothing, footwear, wood, plastic, furniture, chemicals, ceramics. China has a 25% tariff on our goods. Canada is very, very difficult to deal with if you're an author or a publisher. I remember when IBM and the Holocaust was published, it was a bestseller on the New York Times list here in the United States, but it had to be published separately by Random House Canada because Canada does not allow books to be shipped across the border. It's very, very difficult. They tax them very high. It was the #1 book in Canada, too, for a short period of time. But Canada is extremely protective of its borders with result to intellectual property. In fact, even the Amazon.ca website, which I am involved with on a daily basis, is not really an authentic native Canadian website done in Canada. It's an offshoot of the US because Canada will not allow books to be marketed from the United States in that fashion. So it's a workaround. So I think tariffs are going to make a difference. I think that tariffs will not hurt us. I know that lots of people, including Costco, want to save every nickel, regardless of the impact on the United States. But the fact that tariffs can have an extraordinary benefit to the United States. Remember, if we won't buy, if there's a high tariff on French wine, what do? We buy California wine. We buy Virginia wine. We buy a Peruvian wine. We buy all kinds of wines. So it really doesn't hurt us at all. It also means that China has to take less profit because they want to be more competitive and they don't want us buying that widget from Vietnam or from Portland, Oregon. Thank you for that question, Christine. Leonard in Los Angeles. Do LGBTQ have or deserve any special rights? And what about the NCAA policy of men and girls sports? So let me say this. LGBTQ people have no additional rights over any other individual, not even one. But they don't have any fewer rights, not one molecule fewer. What they do have is constitutional rights, individual rights, civil rights, and human rights. They have the same rights that I have. It means that we can't be discriminated against for our race, religion, or creed, which is our point of view. Now, whether men should be in girls' sports, I'd like to quote I believe her name is Linda Lee. She's on the Democratic National Committee, Executive Finance Committee, and she's the chair of the Women's Forum. In just a few hours, she said that the Democrats have got this all wrong. She says men are men and women are women. Now, it's true that there are guys like Rudy Giuliani and Hoover who like to cross-dress and who like to wear dresses. Milton Berle used to do that on television. But the point is, they have a right to do what they're doing, but they don't have a special right to do what they're doing. And one of these international boxing matches, people were worried that a guy who had masqueraded himself as a female boxer, he gave this gal one punch, and she was out. And she said it was the hardest punch she ever got in her life. And the same goes for volleyball and other things. And the NCAA president said this. He said there's only 10 transgender athletes in the NCAA. 10 out of 500,000 athletes. So all these schools are rich and wealthy. If a general bathroom is required for anyone who wants a general bathroom, go right ahead. Men should not be allowed to play in women's sports. If you look at another way, if this woman, Rachel, born of Scandinavian parents, identifies as a black person, you say, okay, that's your thing. But she doesn't get to say, I got reparations coming and I want 40 acres and a mule. And I know a lot of guys, a lot of wonderful Christian guys who really adopt the Jewish lifestyle. They wear the tallis and they like to pray and do all sorts of things because they're so supportive, because of course Jesus was a Jewish person. They like to practice the same religion that their Savior did. But these guys don't get to be in the law of return because they're not really Jewish. They do get to volunteer in the Israeli army, and there are many, many thousands of Jews and non-Jews from all over the world. They're called lone soldiers who have volunteered in the Israeli army. So bottom line is a tiny, tiny molecular group of people who are confused about their identity, and those people, it's none of your business. None of your business. But they need to be left alone, and they get no fewer rights than anyone else, but they get no additional rights. And if there's a conflict, as usually there is in law, one group against another, one value against another, you've got to weigh what is most appropriate in a democracy. And remember, our democracy is not based on majority rule. It's based on majority rule, but minority recognition. So minority must rule with the majority. Stephen in Baltimore, what worries you the most? What worries me the most? What worries me the most is, I think, the anti-Semitic wave and anti-Semitic legislation and action, which the renegade Democrats were promising, is now canceled in the United States. So I think that the train has been canceled. It could be rescheduled to come down the track, but for now, it's been canceled. But I believe that what I'm witnessing every hour in Canada, in London, in Australia, the extreme anti-Semitism, and that is not just persecution and name-calling and exclusion, but actual violence where people are being pelted with bottles near synagogues. One synagogue in Montreal was firebombed for the second time. They say some 80% of Canadian Jews are afraid, and many of them say they're ready to emigrate now. The answer is not to emigrate now. I'm not sure what we need to do about this, but we're on the verge of something that the experts say approaches 1939. And I am going to be devoting the first show of next year to Kristallnacht 2.0, Part 5. We'll be speaking to some experts, and we're going to talk about how to save international Jewry. And I would start with this suggestion. Mr. Trump, call your buddy up there, the governor of Canada, Justin Trudeau, and or Premier, whatever his name is, and say you're going to reimpose, you're going to double and triple any tariffs if they do not protect their Jewish citizens. Do it to Canada, do it to England, do it to Australia. Right now, hour to hour, the Jews are in physical and societal danger. Use those tariffs and use other sanctions against these countries to save Jewry, just as was suggested on March 27th of 1933 at the Million Man March in Madison Square Garden, led by the American Jewish Congress and Rabbi Stephen Wise, when he said that this discrimination against Jews is no longer domestic, it has now risen to the level of an international threat. That's what keeps me up at night, and I'll be working on this very much next year. I've already been invited to several conferences, and you'll find out more about that later. Thank you for a very sensitive question. Richard in Los Angeles, are the Democrats actually anti-Israel and anti-Semitic, or is it an exaggeration? A strong, heavy minority of the Democratic Party is anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. And remember, Israel constitutes half or more of the Jewish population of the world. Now, we just look at this recent vote to deprive Israel of all weapons from the United States, including defensive weapons such as the Tamir missile to go into the Iron Dome. 70 Democrats voted against it. 70. Not 5, not the squad, not the squadron, 20 guys. 70. That's 40% of the Democratic Party. The Biden administration, which is currently led by a sleeping head of state, Joe Biden, which now almost everyone says is a president asleep at the switch, is now facing a major lawsuit for discovery of information and documents involving the State Department spending millions of dollars to fund groups staging boycotts of Israel and even riots in the streets of Tel Aviv. That's right, the United States State Department is funding the groups who are these minority groups, extreme minority, said to be 2 to 4%. This extreme vocal minority is in many ways being funded by the State Department. This should not be a shock. I exposed this years ago during the Obama administration with one of my investigations during financing the flames. And of course, we've spent a lot of money on the Palestinian Authority. We spend it on Gaza. We spend it on Hamas. And what does this do? It all serves to endanger Jews and to destabilize Israel. Now, we've actually done a lot to destabilize the entire Middle East, including what we've done in Iran, giving Iran billions of dollars in continuous sanctions relief, which has allowed them to sell enormous amounts of oil to China. And with this money, they have reinvigorated and armed the Houthis in Yemen, the Hezbollah of Iraq, the Hezbollah of Syria, the Hezbollah of Lebanon. And Israel is starting to take all of these guys down. Israel is trying to make a new Middle East. And what does it mean, a new Middle East? What it means is Israel does not have to wake up on Thursday and wonder if they're going to see Shabbat. It's inappropriate, stupid, murderous to think that Israel has to have a status quo that involves a circle of people who want to murder Israelis, Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, these terrorist groups. All they got to do to stop these wars, all they got to do to stop what's going on in Lebanon, all they got to do is stop what's going on in Iran, all they got to do is stop with Hamas in Gaza, on the West Bank, is merely say, I won't try to kill you tomorrow. But the status quo that's imposed upon Israel is, yes, that's okay. We wouldn't stand for it on the Texas border or the Canadian border, but you gotta live with the occasional bomb, the occasional rocket, the occasional missile, the occasional sabotage, invasion, etc., etc. So stay tuned, because not only are we on the brink of getting a brand new Middle East with Netanyahu, we're on the verge of getting a totally renovated Middle East by actions that the Trump administration is going to take with the Abraham Accords, bringing Saudi Arabia in, bringing other Gulf states in, and we could actually see peace in the Middle East. Now, I realize peace in the Middle East doesn't make money for the Democratic war machine, but it's okay with me, and I hope it's okay with you. Number 12, Murray in Pittsburgh. Can Trump use recess appointments to appoint anyone? The answer is yes. He can use recess appointments, but he's more than likely to use something that has not been thought of before. And that is a law called the Federal Vacancies Reform Act. And it's a very tricky law. But under the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, once the head of the administration is gone, and even if Trump's cabinet guy has not been approved by the advice and consent of the Congress, of the Senate, he has the right, under certain tight circumstances, to put a appointment in. That means he finds a loyalist, he increases that loyalist's salary to a G15, must be a G15, nothing less. And then when the head guy, like the head of the FBI, goes, he can put that guy in and he can serve for up to 300 days. And then he can actually repeat the process if possible. So it's a very, very intricate law that I've only started to describe, but that's the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, in addition to the recess appointments. And I should also say that I think everybody wants Washington shook up. Everybody wants to see disruption. There is so much fat in the Defense Department. The Defense Department is making things we no longer need, like tanks. Do we need M1A1 tanks? Where are we going to use them? But we need drones. Drones are cheaper than tanks. Eisenhower, when one of his first public speeches as president, said, beware of the military-industrial complex. And what this complex means is war is good, war makes money. And that's why all these companies hire all of these generals to serve on their boards and advisory committees. I should say that Pete Hegseth has already got a list of about 60 to 100 generals he wants to fire on the first day. And that's because it's been recommended to him by a blue ribbon panel of military advisors, people who really care about the military. Thank you for that question. Raymond in Miami. How have the casualty numbers in Gaza been exaggerated? Yes, they've been exaggerated. Everybody has said they've been exaggerated, but now there's been a major study of this exaggeration. And this major study of this exaggeration, I've got some bits of it here, done by a friend of mine, states that Gaza has a natural death rate of not quite 5,000 a year in ordinary circumstances. And all those 5,000 have just been counted as war casualties, even though they're ordinary deaths. Now, let me try to give you a stunning example. They've got a guy whose name is Muhammad, and a lot of fighters are turned into women, and a lot of fighters are turned into women and children. They have this guy called Muhammad, and he's listed as a female casualty. So we know he's not a female casualty. And in fact, his name is Jihad Mahmoud Adib Al-Tawil. And his number is 9501-30153. And he was on the April 15th list listed as laryngeal cancer, but 2 weeks later he turned up as a war casualty. In addition, you've got one group of children in one hospital jumping in 1 week from 1,294 to 2,142. So the numbers are just jumping exponentially. This is important because about 6,000 fighters actually invaded Gaza. 6,000. Many or most of them have been captured or tracked down. Israel states that it's already killed about 17,000 fighters. And so you can see that the numbers are grossly exaggerated, but it works perfectly for those who want to commit a blood libel against Israel. Ami in Tel Aviv, what is the status of the Democratic Party? If you ask the leading Democrats will say that the Democratic Party is in complete shambles. About 30 to 50% of it is becoming entrenched as a dangerous fringe. And remember, the Democratic Party isn't just people who are elected to office, but people who work and subscribe to the Democratic Party machine. And these guys are never going to give up. They're going to sabotage the new administration and do everything they can to obstruct. Because remember, the thing that scares them the most is that Donald Trump will not threaten democracy and that Donald Trump will succeed. If he doesn't threaten democracy and if he succeeds, then they become even further outliers to reality. The other half of the party is trying to figure out what they're doing. Who are they? What do they mean? And that's why you've got leading Democrats like this Linda Lee saying we were all wrong on the border. We were too involved with pronouns, too involved with LGBT, too involved with transgender. That's not what people wanted. And she is the head of the DNC Women's Board, and she's one of the elite on the DNC Financial Committee. But so many of them have spoken in the same vein. And that's because the plutocrats became the Democrats, and who were the working people. And the working people took the place of those plutocrats and now occupy the ranks of the Republican Party. There's a chance that the Republicans, which were the party of Lincoln, the party of nonviolence, the party of overcoming slavery, that this party can prevail for the next 10 or 20 years. But there's an equal chance that the Republicans, who are basically stupid, will flub it. They'll mess it up. Look at this terrible law that they have agreed to, this budget reconciliation, which was killed at the last minute by the Dogemeisters. It had terrible legislation in it. Legislation to criminalize means, to protect the corrupt emails of congressional people, to hire DEI for deployment in the military, just at the moment when the military is going to shed its DEI and work on a meritocracy. You've all heard about the terrible things that were in that law. Why were they in that law? And that's because it has been business as usual. And for the Republicans, talk is cheap. You can go on Fox at 5 or 6 and say how much you want to cut the budget and how much you want to go with Elon Musk and Trump and Vivek Ramaswamy, and then when no one's looking, agree to extraordinary bad legislation that would subvert the will of the American people in the next administration. So that's my opinion there. Ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. I want you to hold for my closing word of wisdom, just 2 minutes away. But first, I want to thank my very knowledgeable guests throughout the year who have shared their wisdom with us. And I want to thank my talented international team who throughout the year have given us so many riches. John in Japan, Carol in Maryland, Richard in the Philippines, Christine in Indiana, Holly in Nashville, as well as many others in numerous additional cities around the world. My team, each of them, is comprised of very dedicated people. And we all owe them. I call them my brain trust. I'll see everyone back here in 2 weeks at 3 p.m. Eastern in the new year. You want to be a friend of the Edwin Black Show? Please, I need the help. Go to the edwinblackshow.com/support. Keep me independent. You want to hear me in person, watch my website for events, consult my events page at edwinblack.com. Until then, head over to any Barnes & Noble in the USA or any Amazon, Walmart, iTunes, Google Books, Kobo, or Audible.com platform in 190 countries across this roiling, toiling, boiling planet, where you can find any of my 225 book editions, such as IBM and the Holocaust and Banking on Baghdad. Want an autographed copy? Hit edwinblack.com and click books. Do it now. You can get access alerts to participate live in future shows at theedwinblack.com, and you'll see a much enhanced and exquisitely produced version of this show in about 3 weeks, and prior episodes by subscribing to our YouTube channel at The Edwin Black Show and click the notification button like tens of thousands of others have. I promise you'll love them. We put new ones up each week, produced by my bold international crew. You can follow me at Edwin Black Book on X, as well as Facebook. And now for my closing word of wisdom. If you think you know the worst day of your life, know this: a worse one is coming. And if you think you know the best day of your life, know this: an even better one is coming. I'm zooming out now from our nation's capital. Bless all of you. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year.